The Chargers hosted the Rams for a joint practice on Sunday, and it was Jesse Minter's defense that absolutely dominated Mathew Stafford and Sean McVay's high-flying offense.
You are Locked On Chargers, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Chargers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, and welcome into the Locked On Chargers podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Wade, joined as always by my co-host, David Droegemeier, and we've been covering the Chargers together going on 9 seasons now, but this is our 7th year as the host of the Locked On Chargers podcast, bringing you your team every day. Thank you to the everydayers out there for making us your first listen. I'm very glad to be back, and to make sure that you don't miss the show, go subscribe or follow for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listen wherever you get your podcast from. David, what do we got today?
Well, Daniel, Jesse Minter said that it was very important that he was able to get Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack as his anchors in his pass rush. And boy, did they pay dividends immediately in this joint practice, where they were the catalysts to the Chargers taking away the ball 6 different times at joint practice. They were going absolutely crazy. And one of the guys that was one of the main focuses in that is Kristian Fulton. Kristian Fulton is going crazy. He's making quite an impression at training camp, and that continued at joint practices. And we also got to talk about the quarterbacks and Easton Stick struggling.
Yeah, and I mean, I think we would expect that, but it's also very, very important reps for him to get. But today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more as playoffs wind down. The sports stop sporting like we want them to, but this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right, there's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com/locked-on to get started. David, I'm glad to be back. Thank you to everyone who was so kind to David and just for bearing with us while I was on paternity leave. It was a great time, and I can't be more excited to come back on today's show to talk a little bit about joint practice, and especially, after the Justin Herbert news last week. It's like I wasn't knowing how excited I would be about the joint practice or just, not getting the full effects of the offense, but it was the defense that stole the show, and the defense that was the focus of pretty much all the beat reporters out there anyways, and it was the Chargers defense dominating a well-seasoned Rams offense. And I think that's important because I think this time of the year, offensive coordinators, Sean McVay included in that, aren't going to give up too much. But that's a ton of, firepower that you're going up against. There was Puka Nacua was out there. Kupp was out there. Mathew Stafford was out there. And it's the Chargers defense taking the ball not only 6 times away from the Rams, but also 5 times against their first team offense. Like, that is noteworthy. That is a really, really good sign for Jesse Minter on this defense.
We were hoping that Jesse Minter's defense and that number 1 defense was going to translate from college football to the pros, but we didn't know how quickly it was going to make its presence felt. Well, it's made its presence felt immediately, and it's incredible to see that type of production from the defensive side when we've been clamoring for just an average defense. If they're able to take the football away anywhere close to this on a week-in, week-out basis, it could mean just tremendous things for what this Chargers team could be, because we know how bad they've been the last several years. And it's been a struggle, for them to really do anything, giving up way too many explosive plays, giving up way too much on the ground. And it just didn't matter. It didn't feel like they had a good handle on anything. Now it feels like that defense that they're learning is starting to click and is starting to churn out real results.
Absolutely. Especially about the last week or so. It feels, like things are really starting to come together for them. And this is against Sean McVay. You know what I mean? Like, this is against an offense that's returning a lot of players too.
One of the wonderkind coaches of the league.
But it's not like this is a new offense with a new quarterback and new skill position players. Like, to some extent, they got Blake Corum and some other things, but it's like, it's Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua with Mathew Stafford, and the Chargers are still doing this. And I think one of the themes was just teamwork in this as far as how they got these turnovers. So this is from Eric Smith, the Chargers team writer, about how these things happened. The first was Tony Jefferson made a great play in coverage with the second team defense to break up a pass, and Nick Neiman was there for the interception. That was the only takeaway by the second team unit going up against the Rams second team unit. But after that, it was just, a total bloodbath for the Chargers first team of defense, just absolutely dominating. Alohi Gilman, a few plays later, gets a strip. Dayon Henley scoops it up. The next play, Tito Abonia tipped the ball at the line of scrimmage. Denzel Perryman picked it off. Then they go to red zone, 11 on 11s, right? Very important. Derwin James broke on a Mathew Stafford pass and tipped it into the air for Asante Samuel Jr. to do some nice toe drag swag in the back of the end zone. Another interception off of Mathew Stafford. And then the Rams got a chance for revenge at the end of the game, or the end of the practice, with a 2-minute drill. And it took only 2 plays. It lasted 2 plays before Tui Tuipulotu jumped up, tipped the ball in the air, and Kristian Fulton grabbed another interception. I mean, it was everywhere, but David, that was the big thing. I mean, it was one guy breaking on a football, making a play, and another guy there to pick him up for a big turnover.
Just obviously being in the right place at the right time, these guys communicating very strongly, and them playing complementary football on the defensive side, like really having each other's backs. And I absolutely love the tipped passes turning into interceptions. How many times have we seen that on the opposite side, on the offense for the Chargers? Somebody tip a pass and then Justin Herbert gets intercepted on a pass that should never have been intercepted. It's been something we haven't really seen on the defensive side, and it's something that they said that they've been working on very specifically, and that is paying immediate dividends there with the interceptions. I absolutely love to see that. I mean, the more chances you can give Justin Herbert the football, the better. And they're practicing these, techniques to get these type of results, and it's happening. And it's got to be so rewarding for these guys on defense that are learning a new defense and seeing results against a very high-powered, high-octane offense.
Absolutely. I mean, it's like losing weight or anything, right? If you can kind of see yourself losing the weight, it pushes you to keep going.
Absolutely.
And I think when the Chargers see these results defensively, it's going to start to click for them like, okay, this is why we're doing the things the way that we're doing it. I mean, I love Derwin James. Now you're saying, hey, it was like a volleyball match because the ball was just popping around everywhere. But you're right. Such an underrated part of like batting the football down. I mean, I know Tito had one. Bud Dupree had one, Tui Tuipulotu had one. I mean, there was a bunch of guys getting their hands on footballs at the line of scrimmage, which is huge. So I think the big thing about this practice, though, and the one thing that was coming out of it was because of the pass rush, which is what this team has to do. That is where they are strongest, and the pass rush was causing havoc. I mean, according to Daniel Popper, Khalil Mack had at least 2 sacks and a pressure. Joey Bosa had at least a sack, 2 pressures, and a tackle for loss. Both Tui Tuipulotu and Bud Dupree both batted down balls at the line of scrimmage and made plays against the run. That is the part of the Chargers team that has to dominate, David. And when you do that, it makes the back end look a lot better. It's why you have Nick Niemann's and Denzel Perryman's getting interceptions out there. It's because of what the front four is doing. And that is how it has to be for this defense to be great. They have to build around that.
What's the secondary's best friend, Daniel? It is a ferocious pass rush,
Absolutely.
And the Chargers absolutely have that with Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa. And I love what Jesse Minter said when he was talking about Joey Bosa. He said he's a monster. And that's what we've been seeing, and that's what we've been hearing from all the different beat writers. Even Daniel Popper said in his write-up on practice that, Joey Bosa was dominating. He was absolutely destroying and wrecking practice, and so was Khalil Mack. But that's what we want to see. That's what we've always wanted, to have those guys on the field at the same time, just wreaking havoc and wrecking opposing offensive linemen, because we know that they have that capability. And it wasn't just the pass rush. It was their ability to control the edge and make plays in the running game as well. That's why I want to see a healthy Joey Bosa so badly. And of course, he had to leave practice with the trainers. Hopefully it's nothing serious, because it seems like, to me, he's in rare form. And if the Chargers defense wants to reach the heights that they are capable of, Joey Bosa has to be a part of it.
100%. And it's exciting when you hear how good that Joey Bosa is playing throughout training camp. This isn't day one, right? I mean, people were saying he was beating Joe Alt. And I mean, I think that has more to do with Joey Bosa than it does, with Joe Alt, just because he's kind of on a revenge path. But it only matters if he's on the field, man. It only matters if he can play. And it sucks because it's hard to get really ramped up and excited about it when you're just so hesitant to kind of put your stock into him, being out there. And even today, dominates practice, has to leave the field with trainer. So it's happened before. He's already left practice a couple of times, and he was still good enough to be back in this joint practice today after at least leaving training camp twice, going in with trainers. So they're always very cautious, but man, these injuries are piling up, and Joey Bosa is the guy that could be a total difference maker on this defense, and not even Thule or Bud Dupree can really replace that. he has to be out there for this defense to reach those heights. And if he is, it could look like what we saw against a really high-powered offense. But Kristian Fulton, man, there's not a name I've seen popping up more often at Chargers training camp than Kristian Fulton. And he kept it going not only against Cooper Kupp, but also against Puka Nacua. And when he got those primetime matchups, he delivered. So we're going to talk about that and Jasir Taylor really pulling away with that slot cornerback job and more on today's Locked On Chargers podcast. First, I have to tell you guys that this episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. What are your self-care non-negotiables? Maybe you've never skipped leg day or therapy day. When your schedule is packed with kids' activities, big work projects, and more, it's easy to let your priorities slip. Even when you know what makes us happy, it's hard to make time for it. But when you feel like you have no time for yourself, non-negotiables like therapy are more important than ever. And I think it's really, really important. One thing therapy helps you with is making sure that you're taking care of yourself as well, because even if you're providing for a family and doing all the things you need to do, you have to be at your best to be able to do all of those things. So doing therapy, getting the help that you need on a weekly basis, and making that a non-negotiable is only going to help out. So if you're thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Never skip therapy day with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOn today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOn. David, there was a ton of guys to shout out, and we talked about a lot of them, and it was one of the guys who had an interception that has to start here because every day it feels like there's something from Kristian Fulton. And I think we started out by saying, hey, we hope that Kristian Fulton can be that starter out, on the opposite side of Asante Samuel Jr. And maybe it's hype, maybe I'm overhyping it, but it feels like Kristian Fulton's making a play to be CB1 for this team, right? Even over Asante Samuel Jr. That's just how often he's been making plays, at least over the past 3, 4, 5 practices. He's been all over the place. And I think it's such good news because if Asante Samuel Jr. is your cornerback 1, I think you can get away with it if he has a good season. If he's your cornerback 2, that's a much better situation. I think means bigger things for your defense potentially, especially when we know that both of these guys, especially in this camp, have shown the ability to take the ball away. But I think it was most interesting and most kind of hopeful seeing what Kristian Fulton was doing against Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua. And Daniel Popper went through and talked about those matchups. And David, it seemed like he kind of dominated those guys. And I can't think of a better thing for a guy who's maybe struggled with confidence in the past, like Kristian Fulton, to have a day like this, go up against, two of the leading receivers over the past 3 years as far as receiving yards, and be able to have that kind of performance.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Puka Nacua was a wonderkind sensation last year. I mean, absolutely tremendous. A guy that nobody expected to come in and produce the type of results that he was able to. And so, that's a legitimate weapon that you have to try to shut down if you're going up against the Rams. He's going to be heavily involved in the game plan. Of course, Cooper Kupp went crazy, a couple of years ago. And, I think he's genuinely, universally thought of as one of the better receivers in the league. So if you're able to have success against those guys, it's real, it's tangible. It's something that you should be looking at and saying, okay, we might have something here with Kristian Fulton.
Yeah, and it's starting to feel like that, man. I mean, I know there was a couple videos early on in training camp, Quentin Johnston beating him deep and then dropping a pass, and maybe a couple other times where it was seen that he was beat at practice. And Jesse Minter said the whole time, hey, he just needs to know that not only the coaching staff, but these players have a confidence in him to go be great. And it feels like that's starting to settle in and sink in for him. I mean, this is what Popper said happened. He said, forced a deep ball incompletion against Cooper Kupp. Next play, he got great depth and broke up another pass to Cooper Kupp as they tried to kind of float it into a zone behind him. Then he was going up against Puka Nacua in the red zone, ended up forcing him out of bounds and forcing incompletion, saving a touchdown, and then also had an interception that was none of those passes. Broke up a screen play as well, darting into the backfield to get a stop. That's awesome. Those things are really, really important and positive signs for this defense going forward, because if that is, first of all, that would be one of the best signings in the NFL of all free agency if he's able to continue playing like this. And you don't want to get too carried away, but I think it was just such a roll of the dice. It was such a bet for the Chargers to put as much faith in him as they have. And I think you see this and you're like, oh my, they were onto something, right? They knew what they were doing. There's a reason we didn't see them go get more veteran help at that position. So another guy that maybe we haven't talked about enough, but was mentioned in everybody writing about the Chargers defense today, brought up another cornerback on this defense. And it was Jasir Taylor, who we talked about having a big training camp battle. We know Tarheeb still has a game that's really exciting and could push him. But credit to Jasir Taylor, man, because it feels like he's doing everything it takes for him to secure that slot cornerback job. And if he's winning that job because of how much he improves, even if you like Tarheeb still, you got to be happy with that, because I think still is pushing it. I just think Jasir Taylor is just playing that well.
And that's great. That's great news for me and great news for the Chargers, because that just means Jasir Taylor is comfortable in this defense. He trusts the people around him. He trusts that he knows where he's supposed to be, and he's going out there and he's not thinking, and he's going and making plays. That's what you need to have success. And, they're talking about how he has the speed and he has the intelligence to play in the slot, and he's doing a great job. Whether it's Tarheeb Still, whether it's Jasir Taylor, you just want the best 11 guys out there on the football field at any given point to try to give you the best chance to win. And if Jasir Taylor is proving to be that guy, then more power to him.
Yeah, and I think you always, for certain players that potentially struggled the year before, it's like, yeah, maybe you want them to be replaced, but it's just as good as if, the person that you have to potentially replace them can't catch up to them because they've improved their game so much.
Yeah.
So this is what Jesse Minter said, just a really good sense of how to play the slot, which is not always easy. Guys think you just take your smallest corner and put him at nickel, but it's really, it's its own position. And he has really good sense in there, seeing the run and the pass, reading his keys and understanding the route concepts. He all said smart, tough, disruptive, runs well, good feet, happy with how he's played so far. That was from Eric Smith's article transcribing that. That's awesome. I mean, that's a really, really positive sign. Both Daniel Popper and Eric Smith said he played well at the practice, going up against Stephen Cooper, Kupp, and Puka Nacua at times. And another guy that, maybe gets elevated by an elite pass rush, and maybe a guy you can't get away with playing there. So I think the big thing for him, though, is going to be in the preseason when you're actually having to tackle guys to the ground. High missed tackle rate, not great run defense grades last year especially. So that'll be a point for him to have to go and improve it, because that is obviously one of the things we liked most about Tarheeb Still's game. Let's see if Jasir Taylor can go be that guy. Derwin James has confidence in him. He said, hey, he's a really good tackler. He's doing really well. I'm glad to see him take that next step. And that's awesome. Those are all great things to hear, because now you're feeling a lot better about this trio of starting cornerbacks that you have between him, Sante Samuel Jr., and Kristian Fulton. But to your point, David, it just feels like this defense as a whole is clicking right now. And it feels like they're starting to gain that confidence, and Jesse Minter loves to see it.
Yes, he does. And he said as much. He said results build confidence. It started to stack up the last 3 or 4 days where guys were playing with a lot of confidence and trusting each other and starting to really understand fits and routes and things like that. And that's all you want, especially when you are trying to install a new defense. And of course you're going up against your same teammates, day after day after day. Right. So, you might feel like a little handicapped to where you can't really feel like you can go out there and play at the, 100% or close to 100% level to go see if it actually works. Go see if it actually, if it looks as good in practice, as it does, in the classroom, and go out there and get real results. And they have, and it shows with the interceptions, with the pass rush, with them, doing all the things that they did in the joint practice. By all accounts, they are flying around. And even before that, the last several days in training camp, making all of those plays, it's real. And hopefully, that continues to translate when we start playing preseason games and we start getting into the regular season.
Yeah, and it's going to be hard because there's going to be so many changeable parts during the preseason, and a lot of young guys who you might not have been getting the reps to show how good Jesse Minter's defense is going to be. And I think we saw that last year with Kellen Moore's rushing offense, right? Went absolutely bananas in the preseason, and 2 out of the 3 games over 200 yards, and then they never had that consistency. We thought it was fixed, and it wasn't. So there's certain things you just kind of have to wait and see. But man, it's just for a unit that has so many question marks around it, and also to hear that the run defense was stacking up dudes too today. A lot of unproven defensive linemen in that rotation,
yes,
against one of the best rushing teams in the entire NFL. That's a good sign. And I mean, it is one practice, but man, this is about as good as you could possibly feel about a defense in one practice. That's how good it was on Sunday, which is awesome to see. But offense, not so much. Most people were covering the Chargers defense, and for, the biggest reason being Justin Herbert's not out there. It's the side I would have chose as well. But it sounds like Easton Stick continued to struggle on Sunday after having a really, really tough practice on Friday. At some point, will they consider trying to bring in another quarterback? Should we be panicked about a couple of bad practices? We're going to get into that and more in today's Locked On Chargers podcast. First, I need to tell you guys about FanDuel because I love sports and I love them so much that I never wanted them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer games and the sports aren't sportsing like I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want, and all I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. This summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. It's still summertime, that's right, and there's something for everyone every day all summer long. I've been on a heater. I'm going with the Olympics. Right now, everyone's doubting the U.S. women's national team at the Olympics, which is great news for you because right now you can get Trinity Rodman and company at plus 165 to bring home another gold for the U.S. of A. They had a close game against Japan, a really good defense. Their coaches only coached for like 8 games. I think they're going to be clicking. They have so much talent. I think they can get it done even though Spain is the favorite. So head over to FanDuel.com/lockedon and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. David, there's more to get into offensively because there's really nothing that came out of joint practice offensively. Pretty much everyone covering the defense. We were able to get a couple of nuggets. I like that Brett Coleman said that Joe Alt was playing or is going to be very good. I think that's really encouraging on the right side.
Yes.
And it sounded like the offensive line struggled to an extent, according to a couple of people out there. But it did feel like, between Sunday's practice potential with Easton Stick, where I know he threw at least 1 interception, and Friday's practice where he threw 2 interceptions, according to Daniel Popper, it's a struggle right now. But I do want to thank all the everydayers out there for making us your first listen. Now, go listen to Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast as well as you get ready to draft your team. Get daily insight to the best fantasy draft strategies so you can win your league this season and have bragging rights over your friends. And you can find the link to Locked On Fantasy Football in the description so you don't need to search it. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It is fantasy football season as well. Chargers are a tricky fantasy team. We'll talk more about that at some point.
Yeah.
But Easton Stick. So we haven't talked to you guys since basically my emergency appearance on Friday's show because of the Justin Herbert injury, but we didn't get to talk about Friday's practice where it was Easton Stick being the guy, the quarterback one, getting all the first team reps. And according to Daniel Popper, he really struggled. He had 2 interceptions, but he said, hey, it was more than just the 2 interceptions. 4 of his 6 passes in the red zone drill were broken up. Stick also missed a number of open receivers, quote unquote, according to Daniel Popper. Maybe we shouldn't blame him, man. Look what they did to Mathew Stafford. Maybe Easton Stick shouldn't be blamed for that. But I think there's genuine concern amongst Chargers fans, especially not knowing exactly when Justin Herbert is going to be back, even though they're telling you right now they think he's going to be back for the regular season. Still, I think you're hoping that he wouldn't be struggling this far early on. And I'm not super panicked about it yet. This is from Adam Grossbart of the OC Register, who said the Rams defense had a very good day, albeit against Easton Stick. So take that as you will. I don't know, man. I understand seeing the struggles out there is going to cause some concern, and I think it's rightfully so. We saw him go 0-4 at the end of last season, dealing with a lot of the stuff that held Justin Herbert in that offense back as well. How much are you? Is it super concerning to see this? How are you feeling?
No, I'm not super concerned about it. I think, with Easton Stick, he's getting the lion's share of the first team snaps since Friday. Okay. So right. And I think it's also important to understand that even in the offseason, the QB1 is getting the lion's share of the opportunities with the first team. Okay. They are going to be out there. They're getting the ones that are getting all the snaps. They're building that chemistry with their receivers and their running backs, their tight ends. The backup quarterbacks are getting, a lot less. And so, Easton Stick is now the number 1 quarterback for now. Okay. And so him struggling, after stepping into that spot, with Justin Herbert's absence, I don't think that I'm super concerned that he's struggling a little bit. I think we got to give it a little bit more time, but also with the understanding that according to the Chargers, that Justin Herbert should be ramped up and be ready to play week 1. And that, with the absence of any other information is still what we expect to happen. So until that status quo changes, then I won't be as worried about what happens with Easton Stick.
Yeah, I get that. At the same time, though, it's like You either kind of feel good about him potentially starting games or you don't. And I think it's impossible to feel good about him starting games right now.
Yeah, I don't feel good about that.
And I think, there's, maybe we'll talk about have the Ryan Tannehill discussion. A dude who's played in run-heavy offenses and has played pretty well at some point. If we get a little closer, if they make a signing like that, maybe it tells us, Justin Herbert's a little further away.
Yeah.
I'm not going to totally panic, but it's like, it's kind of what I expect. This has kind of been the Easton Stick experience so far. So he did talk with the media after practice on Sunday. And I thought it was interesting that he said this. He is asked about, if he tries to kind of mimic any of Justin Herbert's game when he gets out there. And he said, maybe how Justin would communicate a certain cadence or something along those lines. But once the ball is snapped, I can't play it like Justin can. There are very few people in the world who can do what Justin Herbert does. And I think that's how he should feel about it, David. Like, he shouldn't be going out there trying to be Justin Herbert. He should be trying to be Easton Stick. And I think that's important.
100%. Yeah. Easton Stick doesn't have the arm, doesn't have the pocket presence, doesn't have the computer in his head like Justin Herbert does. Like, Justin Herbert is a special athlete at the quarterback position, but Easton Stick needs to lean into his strengths and what he does well. And, he is a fairly mobile quarterback. Like, he ran quite a bit when he was in college, and like, he does have some ability to run away from guys. Like, he is fairly athletic, and so I feel like he needs to stick to his strengths. He needs to play his game, and obviously the Chargers believe in him. They decided to re-sign him and keep him as the backup quarterback, so they believe in what he brings to the table and how he goes about his business, and he needs to focus on being Easton Stick and not being Justin Herbert.
Well, and also his offensive coaches have to realize that he's Easton Stick and not Justin Herbert. And I think that's the other kind of important part of this right now is the Chargers getting this time to see what Stick's biggest flaws are. And I think that's really a lot of what's going on right now, because you can't really fully know how, you should kind of formulate the offense until you actually see the person in it and see what has to change. So I think right now, these last couple of practices, you're seeing a lot of things that have to kind of change in this new offense. And I think the good news is you're talking about Greg Roman, right? Who not only worked with Lamar Jackson, one of the most prolific running quarterbacks in the league, the most prolific. He also worked with Tyler Huntley, another running quarterback who is Lamar's backup, who they won games with in Baltimore. You know who else they won games with? Colin Kaepernick, when he had to come in for Alex Smith, and rushing was a big part of his game as well. He worked with in Buffalo, Tyrod Taylor, similar thing. So he knows how to make an offense with a quarterback who might be limited a little bit throwing the football, but has decent athleticism. So I think it's up to the coaching staff to lean into that too. I mean, you talked about him in college. I mean, Easton Stick in 2018, 2019, his last year, 2017, 2018, his last 2 years in North Dakota State, he had over 1,500 rushing yards and 29 touchdowns. He had 29 touchdowns in 2 seasons on the ground at North Dakota State his last 2 years. So I think this is really important. And Omar Navarro, who had a lot of good quotes and transcribed a lot of them on Chargers.com, posted this from Greg Roman saying it's a big time that's really big right now that Easton Stick's getting the snaps. Easton is the starting quarterback today, and he's working with the first unit. You got the first string of the line out there. That's a good place to be. It's different than the second half of preseason games for sure, and I think that's the important part right there, David, because like you talked about a little bit, like this is the best he's going to get as far as reps. Going up against the starting Rams defense is the best he's going to get, as opposed to in the preseason where he might not have all of his guys at his disposal, and he's probably going up. If Justin Herbert was playing, right, he'd be going up against guys who are fighting to make the team on the other squad.
Yeah, these reps right here are invaluable for Easton Stick, going up against the Rams and their defense. And, of course, with the understanding that the Chargers offense and Greg Roman are running pretty vanilla plays. Like, he's not reaching into his bag right now and trying to go out there and make the Chargers offense look as good as it possibly can. He's working on concepts and working on a few basic plays and wants to see how that looks and where they need to go and how they need to teach off of that. So yes, these reps are way more valuable than going up against guys that might not make a 53-man roster.
Yeah, and I mean, that's a double-edged sword, right? Because if you're not going to give Easton Stick or you're not going to hold it against him, can you give the Chargers defense full credit for going up a Sean McVay, who's probably saying the same thing, right? I'm running vanilla plays and stuff like that. You're trying to move the ball, and you're trying to do the plays that you think are going to work. Maybe there's some exceptions, and you're throwing some wrinkles in there. I do think it's probably pretty vanilla, and I don't think he's calling the same offense with Easton Stick that he would have with Justin Herbert, with how well Justin Herbert has, reportedly picked up this playbook and fit into this offense. But, he said nothing beats reps. I'm grateful for getting those right now, because last week when he took over in week 14 and beyond, he didn't have those training camp reps. You know who took all the first team quarterback reps last year in training camp?
Justin.
It's a guy named Justin Herbert trying to learn Kellen Moore's offense, right? So I do think it's important to remember with Easton Stick struggles that he's also in a brand new offense with a lot of new skill position players. And he's just not Justin Herbert that can pick these things up and just make it work as easily because he has a cannon arm and a supercomputer for a brain. So it's not fair to expect it, but I understand fans being a little concerned, being like, hey, you're talking about the guy that could be slated to start week 1, depending on how things happen with Justin Herbert. And I do think it's fair to kind of let this process play out for a couple of weeks and then make a decision if that's going to be good enough for you, if you're going to need him, or if you need to go outside for some help and give whoever that guy is a couple of weeks to try to learn this offense. So very critical time right now. I think invaluable bullets, invaluable reps for this Chargers team going up against a very well-coached team with the Los Angeles Rams. And I think it's going to pay dividends for them, especially the defense building that confidence. But that's going to wrap things up for today's show. Make sure you guys are back here tomorrow talking about Monday's practice, because we'll be back here with you tomorrow to break it down. But until then, to make sure you never miss the show, go subscribe or follow for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listen wherever you get your podcast from. You can also find the show every day on all of our social media. You can find me on Twitter at Dan Talk Sports, David at DroTalkSD, and the show's page at Locked On LAC, on Instagram at Locked On Chargers, and our Locked On Chargers Facebook page. I want to shout out to Oakleo, one of the big fans out there. It's my nephew. I owed him a shout out. And also just thank you to you guys. We are thinking about you, getting you guys on the show. So whether we do a segment here talking about practice, and then we get you guys in the last 2 segments of the show with a fan mail show, maybe a buy or sell, something like that. We know it's been a while. We care about our listeners. We love you guys. We have the best fans in the business. So make sure you guys are back here tomorrow hearing about Chargers training camp on Monday. But until then, guys, take it easy and go Bolts.